Hello, and thank you for joining me for this review of Cordwainer Smith's Quest of the Three Worlds. A nice little addition here. The cover illustration, by the way, is by Tony Roberts. It's not quite a wraparound, but you've got that matching design, I suppose, on the back cover that makes it a very nice, very comfortable to read little book. The attractive ario of rugged geology that you see on the front is actually pretty relevant to at least the first story, maybe the third story in this book, which really confused me when I found it. So, as many science fiction readers of classic science fiction, bird distraction, know, Cordwainer Smith was actually Paul Myron Anthony Lineberger, who died in 1966, who was active in science fiction and wrote science fiction mostly under the pseudonym Cordwainer Smith. I do believe that pseudonym was only revealed after his death. I could be wrong about that. And Cordwainer Smith, who was a great writer, niche, but very admired by many of us in the science fiction reading community, was notorious for writing short stories but not novels. So, to my understanding, the only novel he had was Australia, which is in itself sort of a combination of several stories. And then I came across The Quest for the Three Worlds, which presents in every possible way as a novel. It says one of the strangest tales science fiction has ever told on the front. At the back, it is the era of the rediscovery of man. Casher O'Neill holds in his hand the conscience of the planet Mizzer. Armed with an all-world travel pass, his quest for freedom to rid the 12 Niles of the dictator who's usurped his rightful place. So, it presents as a novel, and for quite a while I wasn't sure that it wasn't. The internet, however, has helped me out with this. Apparently, The Quest of the Three Worlds is made up of 4 stories, which were, at least the first one was written separately and is called On the Gem Planet. It was published in 1963. In this book, it just is described as part 1. And the rest of it is made up of 3 other stories, On the Storm Planet, On the Sand Planet, and 3 to a Given Star, all of which were published in 1965, and that date is kind of relevant to the content. Now, before one gets into the story, one has the introduction, which I found weird as anything. Now, the person who wrote the introduction is John J. Pierce, of whom I had not heard, but apparently he also wrote the intro to The Best of Cordwainer Smith, and he was a known editor and everything. And he's credited with creating context for the continued works of Cordwainer Smith, especially his Instrumentality of Mankind, world-building future universe in which most of his stories are set. All of these ones are set in it. I didn't enjoy the intro very much. It blithered on about religion in a way that I found slightly ominous, and I didn't feel that it contributed to my knowledge of Cordwainer Smith. And honestly, if I'd have read that intro before determining to read this book, I'm not sure I would have. It was kind of odd. So, yeah, anyway. One thing it does do that's quite interesting, it puts the context of our main hero, Casher O'Neill, and his planet of Mizzer. And I think that if you read the book without reading the introduction, you'd realise the Egyptian tie-ins, because Mizzer is actually closer to what an Egyptian calls his own land than English. What English calls it, Casher O'Neill, is apparently a play on words on an Arabic street in Egypt. I can't remember where. It's a lot of odd tie-ins, but that seems relevant and likely because Cordwainer Smith was the person who, with a psychology background and an army intelligence background and a PhD on the Far East, the Middle East, maybe both of them, he liked doing these strange tie-ins. So that was, I guess, kind of valuable. Now, onto the stories. Instrumentality of Mankind. The planet of Mizzer had a hereditary ruler who wasn't a good ruler. I don't know if he was exactly a dictator per se and as such, but he certainly wouldn't care about the planet. Cash O'Neill was his possibly nephew, designated heir in any case, and he was instrumental in bringing in the revolutionaries that took down his uncle's kingdom and took over the planet. However, when they did that, instead of it becoming a better place, they went all bloodthirsty and weird and very Middle Eastern, really. No more politics. And the planet is now in acute misery with a lot of bloodshed happening. Cash O'Neill has gone out into the instrumentality to look for aids of military cash or whatever in his attempt to overcome the revolutionaries and bring Mizzer to a happier existence. In his pursuit of that, he's actually been given an unlimited ticket to the stars, so he can go wherever he like, and that's a gentle touch and a bit of background as to how he's doing some of the things that he's doing. So in the very first story, he's arrived on a planet of Pontoppidan. I don't know how Cordwainer Smith came up with that name. It's a weird one, and I'm guessing that there was a point to it which I don't understand. Anyhow, the planet Pontoppidan is a weird planet. It's lacking in topsoil and it's lacking in water, but it has a wealth of gems. So people walk across paths of rubies or emeralds to get to palaces that are domed and have oxygen within them. On this planet, he's helping for either financial support or a weapon. But the ruler of that planet, in order to assist him, gives him a series of challenges that he must overcome. One of them is he must allow his mind to be scanned to make sure that he isn't actually another bloody revolutionary. And the other, he must solve the question of the horse. There is a horse on Pontoppidan. And that is confusing to them. Because in this future instrumentality, actual animals are not so common. But what is really common, as we see in other Cordwainer stories, is an animal has been taken and mutated and genetically messed around with until it is a human. But it isn't actually got the same legal rights or contemporary status as a human. It isn't regarded as a human, it's regarded as an animal. But they are humans. They look human. They act human. They can rationalize and in every way are what we would think of as a human. Some of them have been so deeply adapted that you can't visually tell that they come from an animal and not from another human. Others have been messed with a little bit less, and like the Tiger Man in the first story, are visibly part of their animal heritage. So this is important because they don't really know what a horse is. So because it's an animal, they keep trying to talk to it and establish communication with it. And they try telepathic means of doing that, they try direct means of doing it, and all they get out of the horse is a horse noise because it's a horse. And they don't understand why it isn't talking to them. So that's the start. Cordwainer Smith does something weird with our perception of what's happening there. For a start, the horse in question is in a geological area of faults and ravines called the Hippie Dipsy, which is pretty hippie. But the other thing is that the way they describe the horse is, the way he describes the horse is odd to begin with. They talk about its hoof as an elongated fingernail or toenail, and he describes it accurately as having 4 legs, but he describes it now as either having 4 arms or he describes it oddly enough that we as the reader aren't actually sure for some time that we're dealing with an actual horse or some sort of genetically modified creature or what. And I really love that messing with your brain that speculative fiction readers can do, so that you don't know what you're actually reading about. You don't have the context, so you come to it with a totally open mind, addressing the thing like the people in the story do, not knowing. So I really like that. Now, it's a great story. It's a way in which the author can expand his inner universe. It is well told, it's consistent, it's got characters. There's a lot of oddities about the way he allows us, the reader, to engage with this quite spectacular world. Reapy Cheap, come on, come on. I have a bird, and my bird can fly. What scared you? So yes, first story, or first part of the book, because by the time I finished this first story, I still thought that I was reading a novel, not a series of short stories interconnected by main character. 5 stars for that one. Loved it. No real complaints. Now, part 2 in the novel, from On the Storm Planet, the original story, takes place on another world where Kasha has gone to try and get a spaceship to take him and the weapon that he won on the first story, which was a pretty unique weapon. I liked it. So he's come to this. It's a great exercise in world building. I was stunned by how exceptional and fascinating this world in the second part or second story is. So it is a storm planet, and he introduces it by saying it used to have a population of 600,000 million or something, huge population, but now it's shrunk dramatically. Kasha goes there, he's brought by a spaceship using this universal ticket he has, but he lands directly in the house or palace of the governor. And the story opens with the governor trying to make a deal with him for the spaceship. He will give him this spaceship, he says. But in return, he has to kill someone. At 2:75 in the morning, said the administrator to Kasha O'Neill, you will kill this girl with a knife. At 2:77, a fast ground car will pick you up and bring you back here. Then the power cruiser will be yours. Is that a deal? Kasha doesn't say no, but he doesn't say yes. He knows there's something weird happening, and whatever it is gets weirder and weirder as this administrator drinks more than should be physically possible for a human, is detoxed by a robot nurse, and just goes on and on. He keeps insisting that Kasha go to this house, kill this small girl when she comes to the door, and then he has the cruiser. Now, it's weird and off-kilter, and it's weird and off-kilter more so for the reader than for Kasha, who's experiencing it. But it is a great opportunity for Cordwainer Smith to give us this world. This world, which used to have such a large population, was eventually abandoned by the instrumentality because the storms are so acute. You can't really do anything. You can only live within these domes. Later, Kasha goes to this house where the administrator is trying to send him. In order to get there, he has to be pretty much wrapped into a protective crash suit, reminiscent of in June when you're getting into a still suit. It's this completely new protective wear, and it's got helmets and everything. Then he's strapped into a pod so webbed in that he can't actually move, and then he's driven to this other house. He's driven by a Forgetti, I think they call. Another fascinating concept of Cordwainer Smith. When someone has committed a crime so bad that they can't be rehabilitated, the option is given that their entire memory is wiped. They don't know who they are or who they were. They don't know what they did. And they come in as a Forgetti, almost as a possession of someone else, in order to continue their life without any of that background. It's a great concept, and occurs often in his stories. So it's a Forgetti that drives Kasha to this house where he's meant to kill this apparently 12-year-old girl, who will come to the door if he insists on seeing the owner of the house. And the journey there is masterful. The storms and the hurricanes and the twisters destroying the world, and we find out that animals that were imported to the world, like whales, have taken to the skies, and they're now wind whales. Only humanity made the mistake of sending orcas, so they're hunting whales, and they're willing to hunt the pods full of humans and get out the tasty snacks. There's also some people who were carried up by the storms, and some of them as children have survived in the storms, so they're these air people or wind whales. It's a great world, and I loved it. Now, when Kasha gets to this house, we've learnt a little bit about it in bits and pieces as it's discussed. Apparently the house belongs to an old Australian who was so wealthy that he came here, built the house, and no one is really admitting who the girl is, so he goes there not knowing that, only that he's meant to kill her. The Forgetti, and every attempt of his to gather information about him ends up being that the robots or the underpeople or any of the Forgettis, anyone he tries to question, says he's been forbidden to talk, not by the administrator, but by the girl herself. So it's really, really weird. And you're going into this weird mystery, and it's great. And then we get there, and it continues to be great, and then it just sort of limps to a really slow, murky part that I didn't enjoy. So the girl is a turtle girl. They took a little turtle, and they messed with it until it was a girl. And now it looks about 12 years old, though it's apparently 900 or 1,000 years old, and has been completely imprinted on her master, the old Australian. He also is very, very old, and the way he's succeeded in doing this is by being in suspended animation-ish, asleep. Most of the time, he might wake up only once a year, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a month, but he's incredibly ancient when Kasha finally sees him. Now, the girl's name is Ruth, and because of the way this instrumentality describes animal people, it's always the capital letter of their species in front of their name. So if we turned a cockatiel into a human, for example, it would be either C. Ruth or B. Ruth if you're going cockatiel or bird. Anyway, so Ruth comes from a turtle, so it's T. Ruth, truth. Cute, right? Could have been, wasn't. Because this turned into the most frickin' annoying character that I have ever had to plow through pages and pages of. This second story was 89 pages, and it could have been cut by 10 or more if we had had T. Ruth, who in herself, it's a great concept. It's a potentially great storytelling opportunity. But no, if only she hadn't told us exactly what she was so many times. It's like 3 or 4 times. Fine. But this is a story, 89 pages. We got to hear exactly what she was more than 10 times. And not one sentence. A paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 whole paragraphs. Whoa-ing about what she is. And how she was made, blah, 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 blah. And I was really, really over that. So, in this section, you've got a few other things that were disturbing. If T. Ruth is meant to be 11 or 12 years old, then Kasha's reactions to her aren't always going to be what we would consider linear or appropriate. Nothing inappropriate happens, but this story is more about exploring emotional depths that are as murky as a quagmire. So there was murk. It's still magnificently written, by the way. Cordwainer Smith, I don't think he could write something bad if he tried to. But in this second story, the whole imprinting and emotional makeup and everything is strongly repetitive, and it's got heavily religious overtones with its whole symbol of the fish thing. Now, Cordwainer Smith has used symbol of the fish religion stuff in previous stories, and I didn't object to it. Here we elevate to 2 pieces of wood stuck together with a person on them. And it's all, oh, so depth of emotion and banned by the instrumentality. So T. Ruth has to go in and wipe his memory of having been shown these 2 pieces of wood stuck together before he can go back into the instrumentality, so he doesn't have his mind wiped or something. I don't know. It gets way religious, and in a way I don't like. Now, I like reading about religions. All of them. and I like exploring their influence on sociology and emotional development and stuff. I don't like being preached to. And this particular story, the second one on the Storm Planet, felt very, very preachy. February 1965. But wait, there's more. Because we go on to the third story, which is on the Sand Planet. Now, the only indication really that makes us feel like a continuous story is Kasha O'Neill's character going through the first three ones and a little bit in the fourth one. And the fact that at the end of the second story on the Storm Planet, we've got this lead up into the third story onto the Sand Planet. You've got this small section at the end, which really belongs in the third section or the third story, honestly. Before T. Ruth kicks him out to go back to his planet and save it all, T. Ruth somehow imprints in his head these magical woo-woo powers where he can do anything with his mind, total telepath, total able to change the morphology of everything. All he has to do is shake someone's hand and he can get into their brain and change it. It's too much. It's not well explained and it's not well integrated. It takes Deus Ex Machina into a whole nother level. And the problem with Deus Ex Machina in stories is if you've got something who can do anything, then there's no real chance of conflict or doubt. You've got someone who has amazing godlike powers and can do anything. So not going to be sitting back and wondering, hey, is he going to win? Because you know he is. And that's the problem with the whole T. Ruth phenomenal magical powers being installed into Kasha in the second story. At the end of the second story, Kasha has been moved through 3D space in some way, so he hasn't had to travel in a spaceship or anything, and he's now back on the planet of Mizzer, which is all set to rescue from the bad dictator. And we watch him walking up to the palace, touching the bad dictator, going inside his glands and arteries or something and changing them around, so now he's a good guy. Yeah, sure. It's not great. And it is all written in a very messianic voice. So the first story felt like science fiction or possibly perhaps an adventure book. The second one, mostly likewise, bit preachy, but it still felt like a story. The third one feels like a mythological messianic fairy story. It's written in that very messianic fashion, and I don't hate those, but it doesn't fit with the other two, and it certainly wasn't what I was in the mood to read. I was thinking of reading science fiction, and here I was reading, and then he went into the sands type feel. I might come back to this particular story one day when I am specifically in the mood for that sort of book, in order to see if I was right about it being bad, or if I just wasn't in the mood. It's entirely possible. I'm entirely a mood reader. So having, in a couple of pages, managed to overcome with his phenomenal cosmic powers, the fact that the bad dictator is bad. Now he's a good guy, because we pinched some arteries or something. Maybe he squashed his adrenal gland and his nose. I don't know what he did. Actually, that could have been a great story. If Cordwainer Smith had actually gone into the biology of how you can go into someone with phenomenal cosmic powers, change their entire metabolism so that from being a bad guy, they're a good guy, I could have read that with great enjoyment. But no, we didn't. We just had a fine flick of the hand, now he's a good guy. And off Kasha goes, wandering into the wilderness. So on this planet of Mizzer, based on Egypt in some way, there are pyramids. I believe there's a Sphinx as well. He has to go through the 13 Niles until he finds the first Nile or the 9th Nile or one of the many Niles. And this, again, messianic. Each one of these Niles is a place that no one has ever gone before, and each one for a different reason. My goodness, do I have an unsettled bird today? And as he starts heading onto this Niles, he encounters D. Alma, a dog-human character that we encountered in the first story, and she has been sent by her people to lead him. sure, to Mizzer, and they're going to wander off into the Niles. And so we wander through all these aspects of, I guess, humanity or possibly mystic realities. In the wandering way, it reminded me a little bit about the comic book series Promethea, only Promethea was interesting and this wasn't, at least not wasn't particularly interesting to me. I did not think it was overall good, and I got sick of Messianic Kasha. I got thoroughly sick of De Alma, who knows the everythings. Okay, so despite that, it is still Cordwainer Smith, and it is still better written than many books. I just wasn't enjoying it. So for example, in page 138 to 140, where they come to the city of the hopeless hope, so you've got this kind of double speak, and De Alma preaches at us how they are so sure that they are right that they never will be right. Very insightful, but has its time. And then she insists that they have to hurry on before they start believing as well. So this overtly messianic, it feels like I'm being preached at even worse than the second world felt that I was being preached at. But to add to that is the problem that I'm really not sure what it was preaching. Is it preaching the instrumentality as God? I'm not sure, because De Alma was sent by her people, and then De Alma decides to stay in one of the many interesting places they pass, and he gets some other woman. They're the Adam and Eve of the Nile. She's a dancer, and she used to be administrator, and apparently she's telepathic or whatever. Should I even to continue trying to describe this story? It's really annoying. Okay, then we go on to 4. Story 4, 3 to a given star, starts without Kasha O'Neill, for which I was abundantly grateful. I was thoroughly sick of Kasha O'Neill. And it doesn't feel messianic, it feels science fiction. The 3 in question are 3 people who have chosen to be put into metallic bodies, and they're being sent to this far star where the instrumentality believes a threat to mankind originates, because telepathic contact with that star has revealed this grackle, men are for eating, kill men and crunch up men or whatever. So they've sent these 3 individuals. Folly used to be a woman. We get told often she was a beautiful woman. Now she's a small spaceship. Sam, not his real name. It stands for Standardized Instrument Metal Body, whatever, machine thing, SAMM, is now this huge robot designed to level the planet, crush mountains, smash cities, get rid of any warlike threat. And we've got this strange cube that in the last worst scenario will blot out their sun, so the threat to mankind is obliterated. They get there. They find the threat wasn't what the instrumentality thought, and they start a new colony of humans on this planet. I'm not going to reveal that one. That was the first and the fourth one were my favorite stories by far, and they're well worth reading for what is in them. They're both good science fiction stories. The second and the third, I'm on the fence about, but 3 to a given star, if you like Cordwainer Smith, I thoroughly recommend reading it. On the Gem Planet, if you like Cordwainer Smith, I thoroughly recommend reading it. If you're not familiar with Cordwainer Smith and you come across those 2 stories, I thoroughly recommend reading them. You will end up with a much better experience, I suspect, than you would on the Storm Planet or on the Sand Planet, unless you're really into the messianic stuff. Rightio. So that was Quest of the 3 Worlds. At the end of the day, I probably am going to be giving this a 3.5 star rating. Like I said, the first and the fourth stories both thoroughly deserve their 5 stars, but the 2 middle ones were not great for me. There is a Kasha O'Neill and telepathic girlfriend Eve, whatever, tie-in in the 4th one. In that, it's Kasha and his girlfriend, what's her name, the dancer, whatever, who first made contact with this far planet, which they can do by throwing their consciousness out in the void with their phenomenal godly powers. Sure. So, a couple of great stories, a couple of not so great stories. Cordwainer Smith, thoroughly recommended. I think the two middle ones are going to bother me for long enough that I'm going to be grizzling about them for ages. On the back of this Gollancz paperback, I will mention Frederick Paul's recommendation. Smith made wonderlands and he made us believe they could be real. Frederick Paul. And the Publishers Weekly, whatever that is, recommends Smith's special blend of myth-making and rich invention. I'm not saying they're wrong. And this was sold in Big W for $1.36. I like that label so much, I'm not even going to try and take it off, I don't think. I doubt if this book is worth anything to anyone except to me as a reader. So this was rather a long review with me mostly complaining about things. Sorry about that. I'm not saying don't read it. One thing that a few other reviewers that I've seen do that I like is they tell you what else they're reading or what they're planning on reading. I finished this yesterday or the day before and I've been hesitating before picking up another book. However, at the same time, I am reading the short stories in George MacDonald's The Light Princess, one at a time. These ones. These are mythic and weird and wonderful. I will review that probably as a whole novel eventually when I finish them. It'll take a while. They are very slow to read in the best possible way. I'm thinking that moving on from Cordwainer Smith, I want someone who tells a consistent story that I can understand and go on board with. So I'm strongly suspecting that Alan Dean Foster's The Inside might be my next book. I haven't started it yet, so no promises. Anyway, thank you for watching if you made it this far, and go away, read good books and enjoy them.